A sister reached out to us with her experience of hell. It's shocking to know many believers will likely end up in hell if they don't avoid the 7 things that were revealed to this sister. Stay to the end to fully understand this. My name is Shalut. I had this near-death experience on the 7th of October 2022. Myself and my friends were enjoying the evening. I suddenly felt an intense pain gripped my chest. It was as if a massive weight was crushing me from the inside and I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred and I felt a cold sweat break out all over my body. I tried to say something to call for help, but the words wouldn't come out. The pain was overwhelming, radiating from my chest down my left arm. I knew something was terribly wrong. I could hear my friends' voices, panicked and frantic, as they surrounded me. Someone was shouting my name, trying to keep me conscious, but I was slipping away. Through the haze of pain, I heard someone scream, "Call 911. She's having a heart attack." The urgency in their voices was terrifying, but I couldn't respond. Everything was fading in and out, the sounds of the room becoming distant echoes. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I lay there helpless. I felt my body weakening, the pain growing more unbearable by the second. My friends' faces were filled with fear and desperation, and I wished I could reassure them, tell them I would be okay. But I wasn't sure if I would be. When the paramedics arrived, everything became a blur of movement and noise. I was barely aware of being lifted onto a stretcher, of the voices shouting medical jargon, of the oxygen mask being placed over my face. The pain was still there, but now it was mingled with a strange numbness. I could feel myself drifting, my grip on reality slipping as the ambulance door slammed shut and we sped towards the hospital. Suddenly the pain was gone. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and I found myself floating, weightless, free from the heavy burden that had been crushing me. I looked down and saw my body lying on the stretcher, the paramedics working frantically over it. But that body, it didn't feel like me anymore. It was just a shell, lifeless and still, while I hovered above, watching everything unfold. It was an experience seeing myself from this perspective. I could see every detail, the paleness of my skin, the way my chest barely moved as they tried to keep me alive. My friends were still there, huddled together, some crying, others with their hands clasped in silent prayer. The room was filled with a sense of urgency, yet I felt completely calm, almost detached, as if none of this was really happening to me. As I continued to observe, I noticed something else, other forms, other souls, hovering near their own bodies. They were like me, separated from the physical, watching the chaos from above. I could recognize them as souls, just as I was, but there was no need for words between us. We were all caught in this strange limbo, aware of each other's presence but not interacting, as if an unspoken understanding kept us apart. Without warning, I felt myself being drawn away from the scene below. The hospital room, the paramedics, my friends, it all faded into a soft blur, and I was pulled into a different place, an atmosphere unlike anything I'd ever known. It was a place beyond the physical, where everything was both familiar and utterly alien at the same time. I noticed a line of souls stretching out before me, moving in a slow, deliberate procession. There were countless souls, all following the same path, and instinctively, I found myself joining them. We were all moving in the same direction, drawn by an unseen force, a quiet but undeniable pull that guided us forward. Each soul around me radiated a soft, pure white light. It wasn't a harsh or blinding light, but rather a gentle glow that emanated from within. As I looked closer, I noticed that not all the lights were the same. Some souls shone with a perfect, unblemished brilliance, while others had spots, dark, shadowy marks that marred the otherwise pure radiance. The spots varied in number and size, some souls had only a few, while others were heavily marked. It was as if these spots were a reflection of something deeper, something that had followed them into this new existence. The line moved steadily forward, each soul quietly following the one before it. There was no hurry, no sense of time passing, just a calm, inevitable progression towards whatever awaited us at the end of this journey. I didn't know where we were going or what lay ahead. As we continued along the path, I noticed a change in the place. The light around us grew brighter, more intense, until it was almost blinding. At the end of the line, I saw the source of this radiance, a magnificent throne, glowing with a light so pure and powerful that it seemed to permeate everything around it. The throne was vast, and seated upon it was a figure, radiant and shrouded in light. The brightness was so overwhelming that I couldn't make out any details of his face. It was as if the very essence of light itself was embodied in him. This was the one who presided over the souls, the one who would decide our fate. As each soul approached the throne, there was a palpable sense of reverence and awe. No one spoke, yet there was a deep, unspoken understanding that this was the moment of truth for every soul that stood before him. One by one, the souls ahead of me stepped forward, their lights dimming or brightening as they approached. The figure on the throne didn't speak in words that I could hear, yet I knew that judgments were being passed. Some souls were enveloped in an even more brilliant light, their radiance intensifying as they were welcomed into a place beyond my sight. Others, however, dimmed further, their spots growing darker, until they were turned away, directed down a different path, one that led away from the throne and into a shadowy distance. There was no argument, no pleading, each soul accepted its verdict in silence, moving on to whatever awaited them next. I watched in silence, knowing that soon it would be my turn to approach the throne, my turn to stand before this radiant figure and receive my judgment. Finally, it was my turn. As I stepped forward, I felt the light from the throne intensify, surrounding me in its brilliant glow. The figure on the throne seemed to focus entirely on me, and in that moment, I felt completely exposed. There was no hiding, no pretending, every part of my soul was laid bare before this radiant presence. The closer I got, the more I felt the weight of my life pressing down on me, every choice, every action, every failure echoing in my mind. As I stood before the throne, the light seemed to pierce through me, illuminating parts of my soul I had never fully acknowledged. The figure on the throne didn't speak with words, but rather with a profound understanding that resonated within me. It was as if the truths being revealed were already known to me, buried deep within my heart, but now they were brought to the surface, undeniable and absolute. The first revelation struck me with a clarity that was almost painful. I realized that while I had professed to follow Jesus Christ, I had never fully accepted him in the way that mattered most. My faith had been more of a routine, something I did because it was expected, rather than a genuine, life-transforming relationship. I had gone through the motions, attending church, saying the right things, but deep down, I had kept a part of myself separate, never truly surrendering to him. Next came. I had been involved in various church activities, but as the light revealed, I had often neglected my responsibilities. There were times when I served half-heartedly, out of obligation rather than love. I remembered the moments when I skipped out on duties, prioritizing my own comfort and convenience over the needs of others. My service to God had been inconsistent and in many ways superficial. Then, the light revealed my commitment, or rather, the lack thereof. I had started strong with passion and dedication, but over time, my devotion had waned. I allowed distractions, doubts, and worldly concerns to pull me away from God's path. I had not remained steadfast, drifting further from the fervor I once had, allowing my spiritual life to grow cold and complacent. The fourth revelation was, I felt a deep shame as the light uncovered the areas of my life where I had indulged in sinful behaviors. These weren't just the obvious outward sins, but also the hidden thoughts and desires I had harbored in my heart. I had justified these sins, telling myself they were minor or insignificant, but now they stood out as dark spots on my soul, marring the purity that was required to stand before God. Love for others was the next sin revealed. I had failed to show true love and compassion to those around me. I remembered times when I had been selfish, putting my own needs above others, holding grudges, and failing to extend kindness to those who needed it most. My heart had been hardened, and I had missed opportunities to be a vessel of God's love in the world. Then came spiritual growth. I had neglected to nurture my relationship with God, failing to grow in my faith. I had been content with where I was, not seeking deeper understanding or a closer walk with Him. My spiritual life had become stagnant, a mere shadow of what it could have been. I realized that by not pursuing spiritual growth, I had allowed myself to drift away from God, losing the connection that should have been the foundation of my life. Finally, the light revealed forgiveness. I had harbored unforgiveness in my heart, holding on to past hurts and grudges. I saw the moments when I had refused to let go, clinging to anger and resentment instead of offering the forgiveness that God had so freely given me. This unforgiveness had poisoned my soul, creating a barrier between me and the love of God. As each of these revelations came to light, I felt a deep, overwhelming shock. I had considered myself a committed Christian, someone who served God and lived a good life. But now, standing before this throne, I saw the truth with painful clarity. Despite my earthly commitment, I had failed in these critical areas, and these failures had left deep, dark spots on my soul. The figure on the throne didn't need to speak, the verdict was clear. I was unfit for the kingdom of heaven. My sins, the spots that marked my soul, had disqualified me from entering the place of eternal light and peace. Despite my good intentions and outward appearance of righteousness, I had fallen short of the standard required to dwell in God's presence. The weight of this realization was crushing. I had spent my life believing that I was on the right path, only to discover that I had been drifting away from God all along. As the last of the revelations settled within me, the figure on the throne raised a hand, and without a word, the command was clear: I was to depart. A profound sense of finality washed over me, heavier than anything I had ever felt. The light that had surrounded me began to dim, and with it, a powerful force took hold, pulling me away from the throne. I tried to resist, to hold on to the light, but it was useless. The pull was relentless, dragging me away from the radiant presence, away from any hope of redemption. As I was drawn further from the throne, I felt my garment begin to change. The pure white that had once clothed me started to fade, darkening with each passing moment. I looked down in horror as the spots on my soul grew larger, spreading like a stain, consuming the light that had once been there. My garment, which had once glowed with a soft, holy radiance, now dulled and turned a sickly, shadowy gray. With the loss of that light came an overwhelming emptiness. It was as if the very essence of who I was, everything that made me feel alive, was being stripped away, leaving behind a hollow shell. The peace, the comfort, the sense of belonging I had felt just moments before were all gone, replaced by a void that seemed to consume my very being. The force that pulled me grew stronger, more aggressive, and I was hurled through the darkness at a terrifying speed. The light of the throne faded into the distance, and all around me the shadows deepened. I felt the atmosphere change again, growing heavy and oppressive, filled with an unbearable heat. The air was thick with a sense of despair, a place where hope was a foreign concept. Finally, I arrived in a vast, desolate land, a place where the light of the throne could not reach. The air was filled with the sounds of anguish and torment, cries of souls in perpetual suffering. As I looked around, I saw countless other souls, their garments as dull and lifeless as mine, writhing in agony. And then, I felt the beings that had been waiting for me. Dark, twisted figures emerged from the shadows, their presence filling me with a dread unlike anything I had ever known. They approached me without hesitation, their intentions clear. This was their domain, and I was now one of their own, destined to share in the torment that filled this place. As the dark figures closed in, my heart filled with a terror that words cannot describe. These beings, twisted and monstrous, were unlike anything I had ever imagined. Their forms were shadowy and indistinct, but there. Without a moment's hesitation, they seized me. There was no escape, no resistance possible, they were in complete control. I was helpless as they began to drag me across the barren, cracked ground, pulling me toward an unknown destination. The force with which they moved was terrifying, and I felt as though I was being torn apart, both physically and spiritually. As they dragged me deeper into this nightmarish land, I could see the fate of the souls around me, those who had arrived before me, now enduring unimaginable torment. Everywhere I looked, there was suffering. Souls were trapped in forms of agony, each one reflecting the darkness they had brought with them from their earthly lives. Some were chained, writhing in pain as they struggled against bonds that would never break. Others were engulfed in flames that did not consume but eternally burned, their cries of anguish echoing through the desolate air. I saw souls clawing at the ground, trying to escape pits of fire that continually consumed them, only to be dragged back down by the very shadows that tormented them. Some souls were caught in endless cycles of despair, reliving their worst moments over and over, with no hope of reprieve. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the sound of endless wailing. Just as the beings began to drag me closer to the heart of the torment, I felt a sudden, intense pressure in my chest, an unbearable force that seemed to come from nowhere. The world around me trembled, and the shadows wavered as if something powerful was trying to pull me back. The beings tightened their grip, but their hold began to slip, as if some unseen force was wrenching me away from their grasp. The pressure in my chest intensified, and I could hear the doctors shouting orders, their voices growing louder, more urgent. The darkness around me began to shatter, cracking under the weight of whatever force was pulling me away from the brink. I could feel the beings trying to drag me back, their grasp desperate, but the force pulling me upward was stronger, more insistent. Then, with a jolt that felt like lightning coursing through my entire being, I was thrust back into my body with a sudden, overwhelming force. My eyes flew open, and I gasped for air, my lungs burning as they filled with oxygen. The doctors, who had been working so frantically, paused for a brief moment, their expressions a mixture of shock and relief as they realized that I had returned. The intensity of the revival shook me to my core, my body trembling as I lay there, the memories of where I had just been still fresh in my mind. The moment I returned to life, everything changed. The experience had shaken me to the core, leaving no part of my soul untouched. I couldn't forget the darkness I had witnessed, the torment that awaited me, or the spots on my soul that had nearly cost me everything. The memories of that place, the verdict I received, and the beings that tried to claim me were imprinted on my heart with a clarity that would never fade. From that day forward, my life became a testament to the mercy I had been shown. I knew I had been given a second chance, and I was determined not to waste it. My faith, which had once been lukewarm and routine, now burned with a fervor I had never known before. I committed myself fully to living according to God's expectations, understanding that anything less would be a betrayal of the grace I had received. Every day, I sought to align my actions, thoughts, and words with the teachings of Christ. I became more mindful of my choices, knowing how easily I had drifted from the path before. My service to God was no longer a mere duty but a profound privilege, something I approached with a heart full of gratitude and humility. I knew that every act of faithfulness, every moment of devotion, was an opportunity to cleanse my soul of the spots that had nearly condemned me. To all believers, I urge you with the deepest sincerity, Take heed of the lessons from my experience. The 7 sins I encountered were not mere failings but severe offenses that jeopardize our place in God's kingdom. Each of these areas is critical to our spiritual journey and our standing before God. Here's a heartfelt admonition to avoid these pitfalls. Ensure that your acceptance of Jesus Christ is genuine and complete. Serve God with integrity and dedication. Stay steadfast in your walk with God. Guard your heart and mind against sin. Show genuine love and compassion to those around you. Pursue continuous growth in your faith. Don't be content with where you are spiritually. Seek deeper understanding, pray earnestly, and engage with God's Word to develop a closer, more intimate relationship with Him. Finally, release any unforgiveness you hold in your heart. May you find strength and grace to walk this path faithfully, avoiding the pitfalls that can lead to spiritual destruction. Seek God with all your heart and let His Spirit guide you in every step. Thank you, friends, for staying to the end of this experience. Kindly like and share this video. Subscribe to our channel to get notified each time we post another edifying video.